So this year I bring you a beta quality review for a beta quality game because I can't be bothered to do simple things either, like put text in a readable location. Joking aside, I can't review what doesn't exist, so you're in for a fairly short review. Let's begin with delays as usual. Split screen, nope. LAN, nope. Online, everything is hosted on dedicated servers for which the software has not been provided to us. Well, that's easy. Now, keep in mind we cannot have a controlled environment without control of the server, so there will be some accuracy loss here. That taken into account, averaged over 428 recordings, Black Ops 3 has an approximate delay of 57 milliseconds at 0 ping. That's more than 100 milliseconds less than Treyarch's last title. It's been a long time coming, but after however many years since the major issues began, a COD developer has both acknowledged a problem with their netcode and done something about it. And of all the developers to do so, it was Treyarch, a studio known for producing games often regarded as fun, but not particularly strong in the technical side. So it's nice to see this studio becoming more well-rounded and more professional. Their result with Black Ops 3 could certainly be better. They are only just now approaching what they had 7 years ago in COD, so we're almost back to where we started. But where we started was a fairly reasonable place, where players complained about lag and high ping for sure, but rarely did they complain about the way in which the developers handled that lag, i.e. lag compensation. Of course, this review would be done right now if the entire game reflected the quality of the previous CODs, and while I did say this review was going to be short, not that short. Black Ops 3 displays significant variance in its baseline delay. I've recorded spikes of up to 267 milliseconds on a 40 millisecond ping server, which, when combined with the previous data, results in an average of about 100 milliseconds as opposed to 57. Some variation is normal. We could expect a range of about 5 frames given Black Ops 3's network settings, which we might get to later, and we can see that in the data collected, anywhere between 4 and 8 frames inclusive on a 40 millisecond ping server. Yet interspersed in that completely normal data are periods of 13 frames, 14 frames, 15 frames, delays far outside that normal range and clearly out of place. Taking a step back for a moment, for those who just want to know why this matters, players experience these spikes as inconsistent gameplay, periods where the game's behavior changes unexpectedly and what was working, hit detection for example, no longer functions as it once did. If players do not immediately recognize what has occurred and switch playstyles accordingly, the entire direction in which a match was headed may change drastically. Teams clearly in the lead can be seen to fall apart and lose for seemingly no reason. No reason, if not for the unexpected change in delay. It's worth noting that similar behavior was seen last year with Advanced Warfare on its dedicated servers, but not in player-hosted matches. I don't have the option to test player-hosted matches in the beta, so we'll have to wait for the full release for that information. Regardless, for the purposes of the delay table, I chose to exclude those spikes before averaging the values, for both Black Ops 3 and Advanced Warfare, for I cannot be certain of their exact origin. My concern here is whether the issue is within the control of the developers or not. Criticism only where criticism is due, of course. And there's more than enough to criticize without including problems the developers have no control over. Given that this was a PC release, I felt it prudent to record the incoming packet frequency. The same delay spikes were present there, which is why I'm reluctant to hold Treyarch directly accountable for the issue. While it eliminates 2 possibilities, it is not caused by a user's network configuration, nor is it likely to be caused by the game client itself, another 2 still remain. The cause is either located somewhere the developers and their associates do have control over, within the data center, within the server, or within the code, or the cause is located between the users and the dedicated servers, for example, the hardware of a random internet service provider, which is generally outside of the control of anyone involved. I cannot differentiate the 2 from here, at least not with the beta, so Treyarch gets the benefit of the doubt. That being said, Treyarch will still need to find a solution as soon as possible, for most users are perhaps not as concerned with whose fault it is when the result remains the same either way. The improvement to the baseline delay discussed earlier has, for many users, been overshadowed by inconsistency. And Treyarch has not exactly given any options here. We are forced to use these servers, whether they work or not. While dedicated servers are certainly a welcome addition to the series, it is the developer's responsibility to ensure their quality. If they are even less stable than a player's connection, that defeats the purpose of having them. At least in their current state. The solution? Get the server browser back and release the dedicated server software for unranked matches. The players themselves will bypass the problem until it can be isolated and patched. And if the wait for a patch is to be as long as the wait for delays under 100 milliseconds, well, I'm sure we'd all appreciate having a good experience within this decade. And hey, what do you know, they're actually doing that now. See, that's why I wait so long to upload these videos, apart from sheer laziness. On the downside, they're not expecting to get around to that until at least March of 2016, which is about the time they start advertising the next title. Either way, I have to give them credit for taking appropriate action, even if it is extremely late. Basically sums up the entire game. Moving on, you may notice a few more similarities with Advanced Warfare in my review on that. Connection with the dedicated servers is made upon loading the game. Location, etc. is determined at that point, and at least insofar as the menu is concerned, that information is not updated until the game is closed and run again, and so on. Some important changes have been made, however. Connections are now allowed to dedicated servers with high pings. Matchmaking appears to search for better options first, as expected, but players will eventually connect somewhere within a reasonable time frame. Maximum wait time was about 30 seconds using the worst possible settings to force a connection to South Africa from the west coast of North America. A significant improvement from the nearly 17 minutes often required by Advanced Warfare to simply match normally, those with very high or very low calculated skill levels being particularly affected. Incidentally, Treyarch has stated they will not be including skill-based matchmaking in the lobby matching process, something we've been told before and perhaps not the most truthful of statements, so you'll forgive the apprehension. However, should this turn out to be true, it would be excellent news for those whose primary concern is connection quality, for as much as some would like you to believe, skill-based matchmaking does negatively affect connection quality, for obvious reasons, I should hope. There are other reasons too, and other ways of using such types of matchmaking, for which I've been meaning to upload a video, but that's part of my seemingly endless backlog. As for Black Ops 3's matchmaking quality insofar as the usual ping-based success rate is concerned, no comment. I need the ability to host servers to evaluate that, as testing matchmaking without knowing which servers are available to be matched to is a rather pointless endeavor. Quality aside, when these connections are made to a game in progress, they are now made to dedicated servers directly, as opposed to a player acting as a temporary matchmaking target. Likewise, the dedicated servers now also host the lobbies prior to game start, whereas players hosted them previously in Advanced Warfare. This eliminates a number of problems, which you might imagine would otherwise occur as a result of both matchmaking and initial connectivity being dependent on the lobby host and not on the dedicated server where the match is actually played. Just another baffling mistake in design we've had the pleasure of witnessing over the years, but one which is no longer with us in Black Ops 3. Be aware this behavior may differ on the consoles. I'll test it again for the full release. As you may have guessed, some of these changes will result in laggy players being present in your matches. Thankfully, that's not such a problem this year. The low delay of Black Ops 3 essentially precludes the use of latency balancing, and by extension, any mistakes in its implementation. Therefore, with about a 99% certainty, high-ping players will not gain an advantage over low-ping players, nor will they create a laggy experience for everyone else. A welcome departure from certain previous games, at least for those of us who prefer fast responsiveness and the lower ping is better paradigm. Unfortunately, poor connection quality or stability as opposed to purely high ping has been creating issues for players. Black Ops 3 suffers from players warping slightly, not on their screen but as seen by others, making the movement of some players more difficult to predict at times. Part of this is related to a flaw in the engine, which does not necessitate replacing the engine, by the way. There are valid reasons to do so, but this is not one of them, for only a patch is required. The other causes are related to how the game handles discrepancies between a player's position on the server and on the clients. If a player has a poor connection, there will be discrepancies which need to be resolved. The question for the developer is how to resolve them. At one extreme, you have the server expressing absolute control. The older CODs lean more toward this option. Laggy players would experience all of the negative effects of their lag. They would rubber band, they would see other players warping, and generally they would have a poor experience overall, while the other players would not be affected. At the other end of the spectrum, the clients have control over their positions. Black Ops 3 leans more toward this state when viewed from the perspective of a player. If a player has a terrible connection in Black Ops 3, it is very unlikely that they would ever notice insofar as movement is concerned, but everyone else certainly would. Mixed in with this are cases where players get too close to objects or clutter in a map, and both the server and the clients predict the result differently. From a programming standpoint, that is more forgivable. Similarly, I doubt that many players really care about opponents getting hung up on scenery. It is a problem, particularly when exploited, but there are more pressing and more constant concerns than that. What is controversial, and what has been a heated topic since at least the days of Modern Warfare 3, is the idea that a developer would prioritize the experience of the so-called lowest common denominator. Whether that be a laggy player, whether that be a player who does not use real-world equipment of reasonable quality, for example headphones, whether that be a player who is simply not very skilled, etc. Should that player not merely affect, but determine the experience of everyone else? Should everyone else be brought down to their level, so to speak? I prefer to leave that discussion up to you, the viewers, and the people who experience the results of that decision on a daily basis. My concern is that whatever the developers choose to do, they do it properly. If not, we end up with the worst of both worlds, where everyone suffers, as we have seen time and time again in recent years. On the bright side, this particular issue is relatively minor. The warping has been nowhere near as bad as what players experienced in Advanced Warfare. It is, however, exploitable to some degree. It would be nice to have that patched sooner than Advanced Warfare's map glitches, by which of course I mean it would be nice to have that patched. Separate from this, we have the player's experience of hit detection when the intended target is not warping. This essentially epitomizes Black Ops 3. There have been technical improvements here by way of patching some of the surprisingly amateur mistakes made in previous COD titles. In practice, however, much of that effect has been lost due to the interaction of other, still unresolved problems. As such, expect variable results here, as with the rest of the game. Black Ops 3 has potential, much like Ghosts had potential and Modern Warfare 2 before that. It remains to be seen whether it will realize this potential to the fullest or allow a series of small mistakes to dominate. There are a couple other topics I'd like to discuss, but this review is getting a bit longer than intended, so I'll leave that for another time. It's also not really worth discussing elements of game design at this point, given that presumably they will change for release. Hopefully. So that's it then. Overall, Black Ops 3 is an example of how to deal with criticism correctly, and an example of what they should have done years ago. Don't deny that a problem exists, and don't try to do damage control by insulting your critics. Just fix the problem and carry on. You end up with a much better game, and you gain consumer confidence and goodwill as a result, and you do all of it by just doing your job as a developer. There is still a ways to go towards fixing the issues here. Obviously, the baseline delays still need improvement, and more importantly at this point, there is the inconsistency to deal with the dedicated servers. But this is certainly an improvement over the last title. Good news, as long as the developers don't think they're done here, and as long as they continue to respond to criticism in a positive manner. I'll have more information for you after the full release, with all its features available, and after they've had a chance to patch their usual launch problems. Until then, check the comments section for any updates, as I tend to post there far more often than I post videos. And while you're there, feel free to post any questions you may have, for not all problems with the game are so immediately obvious.